What if a band's greatest album was never supposed to exist? They sent a teenager's letter to the wrong address. They pulled their lead singer out of a bag of rejected mail. And when a record label ordered them to record Dvořák, they recorded something else entirely, in secret. Executives didn't know until it was done. Nights in White Satin was 5 years old when America finally heard it. This is the story of how one discarded mailbag changed the sound of a generation. Birmingham, England, 1964. 5 young men from the industrial heart of Britain had just done the impossible. In a music scene dominated by Liverpool mop tops and London mod sophisticates, the Moody Blues crashed onto the charts with a raw, aching cover of a Bessie Banks song called Go Now. That record hit #1 in the United Kingdom. It reached the top 10 in the United States. Suddenly, the Moody Blues were everywhere. Television appearances, screaming crowds, their faces in every music magazine from London to Los Angeles. They had broken through the wall. They were legitimate. And then it all fell apart. Go Now was, in many ways, the worst thing that could have happened to them. It set a bar they couldn't clear again. The follow-up singles stumbled. From the Bottom of My Heart disappeared from the charts almost the moment it appeared. Every day followed the same path. The momentum that had carried them to the top of the British invasion conversation simply evaporated. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. The Moody Blues had emerged from Birmingham's Brumbeat scene, a gritty blues-soaked world of smoky clubs and working-class audiences who wanted their music raw and loud. Lead vocalist Denny Laine was the engine of that sound, charismatic, soulful, and utterly essential. But by 1966, Laine himself had grown restless. He later admitted he didn't want to be in that pop star bag. He wanted something else entirely. So he left. Then bass player Clint Warwick followed him out the door. What remained was a band in serious trouble. Mike Pinder on keyboards, Ray Thomas on flute and vocals, and drummer Graeme Edge held the name together, but barely. Their management company had collapsed, taking their royalties with it. They owed thousands of pounds in advances to their record company, a debt that felt like a sentence. Ray Thomas would later describe those years as marked by diabolical living conditions. By late 1966, the Moody Blues weren't a band on the rise. They were 3 men staring at the end of the road, carrying a famous name that had become a burden. The question wasn't how to recapture their success. The question was whether they would survive at all. Here is where the story bends in a direction that, looking back, seems almost too perfectly constructed to be real. Eric Burdon of The Animals placed an advertisement in Melody Maker in the summer of 1966. He was searching for musicians to join a new version of his band, The New Animals. Dozens of hopeful young musicians responded, sending letters and demo discs to an address in London. One of those letters came from a 19-year-old guitarist and songwriter named Justin Hayward. He was from Swindon, hardly a city on the rock and roll map. He had briefly played in a group called The Wild 3, backing veteran British rock and roller Marty Wilde, and had signed an 8-year publishing deal with folk pioneer Lonnie Donegan that he would later come to deeply regret. Hayward was talented, earnest, and largely unknown. He was reaching for something, though he wasn't entirely sure what. Burdon's band filled up. He had no use for the pile of letters that had accumulated, but rather than discard them, he passed the whole lot to his friend Mike Pinder of the Moody Blues. Graeme Edge later reflected on what happened next with a kind of stunned wonder. He recalled that the band got Justin out of that, pulled him out of a hat, talent like Justin, straight out of a hat. Pinder called Hayward. He drove out to meet him, and in the front seat of a car, he listened to a small 45 RPM player spinning one of Hayward's demo recordings, a single called London Is Behind Me. What Pinder heard in those few minutes convinced him immediately. He told the others, simply and directly, he's the one for us. Around the same time, the band brought back an old friend. John Lodge had originally played alongside Pinder and Thomas in a pre-Moody group called El Riot and the Rebels, but had chosen to pursue a technical education instead of a music career. By late 1966, Lodge had finished his degree and was ready to return. His timing was perfect. 2 new members, 2 completely different personalities. Hayward brought an introspective, melodic sensibility that was entirely unlike the R&B sound the band had built its identity on. Lodge brought a rhythmic drive and creative confidence to match him. But none of this was inevitable. If Burden's pile of letters had been tossed, Hayward's would have vanished with it. If Hayward had sent his demo 1 week later, or to a different address, Pinder might never have called. The survival of the Moody Blues, and everything that followed, hinged on a bag of discarded letters. Justin Hayward's arrival did not instantly transform the Moody Blues into the band that FM radio would come to love. That transformation required one more element, a strange, unwieldy, almost impractical keyboard instrument that Mike Pinder understood better than almost anyone else. The mellotron was a British invention unlike anything else in popular music at the time. Each key on the instrument triggered a length of magnetic tape, containing a pre-recorded orchestral sound, strings, flutes, brass. Press a key and you heard a real cello. Hold it longer than 12 seconds and the tape ran out. The instrument was cumbersome, temperamental, and expensive to maintain. John Lodge recalled the band cycling through other instruments first. Piano, Hammond organ, farfisa. None of them felt right. Then Pinder said, "You know, I used to work for a company called Melatron. That fact, the almost absurdly convenient detail that the band's keyboardist had previously worked at the Melatron factory in Birmingham, became one of the turning points in the history of rock music. Pinder didn't just know how to play the instrument. He knew how to fix it and coax sounds out of it that most players couldn't get. He understood how to make it serve the band's vision in a way few others could." With Hayward writing introspective, emotionally layered songs and Pinder commanding the mellotron, the band's sound began to shift away from the working-class R&B of their Birmingham roots. The music became more cinematic, more searching. It reached for something that didn't yet have a name. Hayward himself later acknowledged that the band didn't have our hearts in it until we began to do our own songs. That honesty captured something essential about the transformation. The old Moody Blues had been performing someone else's vision. The new version was, finally, performing their own. The irony was sharp. The band that had succeeded with a song written by an American soul singer was now building its future on original compositions that sounded like nothing else on British radio. They were abandoning the one thing that had worked in favor of something untested, unproven, and entirely their own. It was either an act of artistic courage or an act of commercial suicide. By the end of 1966, no one could say which. In early 1967, the label handed the Moody Blues what appeared to be a lifeline. They had invested in a new proprietary audio system called Dvořák Sound, a high-fidelity stereo format designed to compete with the audiophile technology of the era. To demonstrate its capabilities, label executives needed a recording that could showcase the depth and range of the format. They initially wanted a rock version of Antonín Dvořák's New World Symphony. The Moody Blues were asked to take part. The band had a different idea. What followed was, in the words of Justin Hayward himself, a conspiracy among all U.S. musicians who were present. Instead of the Dvořák symphony the studio had in mind, the band and their collaborators, producer Tony Clark and orchestral conductor Peter Knight, quietly substituted the band's own original stage material. Between May and November of 1967, in the label's own studio, they recorded a complete concept album about a single ordinary day in the life of an ordinary person. Executives did not hear the full picture until the recording was finished. When the label finally heard the completed album, the reaction was cold. Hayward recalled their response with a mixture of amusement and satisfaction. "When we played the finished product to all these old directors, they said, 'This isn't Dvořák.'" Ray Thomas added that the label weren't very pleased with it, but still they had invested the studio time, and they put it out. The album was days of future past. It contained a song called Nights in White Satin, a piece Hayward had written at 17, alone in a room, trying to work through feelings he couldn't otherwise express. The London Festival Orchestra, in reality a group of session musicians conducted by Peter Knight, wrapped Hayward's guitar and voice in something that felt like the inside of a cathedral. Nights in White Satin. The band members themselves were not present when the orchestral parts were recorded. Peter Knight arranged those sections separately, and the two layers were combined afterward. The fact that it sounded as unified and seamless as it did was a testament to Knight's extraordinary skill. What the label had intended as a demonstration of their audio system became instead one of the defining artistic statements of the late 1960s. The suits had been outmaneuvered, the musicians had won. It is worth stopping here for a moment to consider what the world looked like without the Moody Blues that actually emerged. By 1966, the British invasion was cresting. Bands that had ridden the first wave of R&B influenced rock were beginning to scatter in different directions, or disappear entirely. The Animals fractured. Manfred Mann reinvented themselves multiple times, searching for a new identity. The Yardbirds collapsed under the weight of their own restlessness. The original Moody Blues, the R&B act from Birmingham with one massive hit and no follow-up, fit neatly into that pattern. Without Hayward, without the Melatron, without the quiet act of creative rebellion that produced Days of Future Past, the band's trajectory almost certainly followed the same downward curve. Denny Lane's post-Moody project, the Electric String Band, was an early attempt to blend strings with rock. It attracted critical notice, but failed to find an audience and broke apart quickly. It was proof that the idea of merging orchestral elements with rock songwriting was not, on its own, sufficient. The songwriting had to be there. The emotional depth had to be present. And without Justin Hayward, it simply wasn't. Some music critics later noted that the Moody Blues created an entire genre with Days of Future Past. More carefully put, they helped define a form of symphonic rock that would evolve into progressive rock. That depended on someone first proving it could work at a commercial and artistic level. Without the Moody Blues doing it first, the willingness of labels to fund expensive high-concept albums in the early 1970s might have been substantially diminished. No Days of Future Past meant no template. No template meant a different, narrower path for every band that followed. For the listeners who came of age in the late 1960s and early 1970s, a world without Tuesday Afternoon, drifting out of a car radio on a summer afternoon, or without Nights in White Satin filling the dark in a late-night room, is almost impossible to imagine. Those songs were woven into the fabric of a generation's memory. They felt inevitable. They were anything but. Days of Future Past was released in November 1967. In the United Kingdom, it performed modestly. Nights in White Satin peaked at number 19 on the singles chart in early 1968. In the United States, the album barely registered, reaching only number 103 on the charts. By most commercial standards, it looked like a quiet failure. The band kept working. Over the next 5 years, the Moody Blues released what became known as the Classic Seven, a run of albums that stands as one of the most sustained creative achievements in the history of rock music. 7 albums in 6 years, each one building on the last, each one deepening the band's language of orchestration, introspection, and emotional scale. On American FM radio, something was happening in parallel. The format was changing. Disc jockeys were gaining autonomy. Album-oriented rock stations were springing up in cities across the country, playing longer tracks, deeper cuts, and material that the old AM system would never have touched. And those DJs were playing the Moody Blues. Then, in 1972, something remarkable happened in Seattle. Graham Edge later explained it with a clarity that captured the spirit of the era perfectly. There used to be things called regional breakouts. These FM guys had their own playlists. DJs were stars in those days. We had a regional breakout in Seattle. Local FM stations began playing Nights in White Satin again, a song that was now 5 years old. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The resurgence spread. The record label, which had been prioritizing newer material rather than pushing the old single again, was eventually forced to go along with the demand. Hayward later recalled the moment with visible satisfaction. The label had to hold up their hands and go, "Okay, let it go." It was wonderful. There was no promotion involved at all. Nights in White Satin reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1972. A song recorded in 1967 had become a top 5 American hit 5 years later. It was the people's victory over the industry over the calendar, over the machinery that decided what people were supposed to hear and when. By the time the Moody Blues went on hiatus in 1974, they had done something that very few bands in the history of rock music managed to do. They had reinvented themselves so completely that the original version of the band felt like a different group entirely. The 7 albums they released between 1967 and 1972 represented a sustained creative vision that was remarkable in its consistency. Each record explored the same emotional and philosophical territory: the search for meaning, the relationship between the individual and the infinite, the beauty that existed in the ordinary passage of a human day, while finding new musical approaches to that exploration. Justin Hayward's voice was the thread that ran through all of it. Warm, aching, intimate, and unmistakable. He had arrived as a relatively unknown young songwriter with a demo disc and a letter addressed to the wrong band. He became the defining sound of an era. Ray Thomas, reflecting on the band's work in his final interviews, spoke about what they had built together with producer Tony Clark. He described it as a deeply emotional statement of the human condition. That was not modesty. It was an accurate assessment. Hayward himself returned often to the song that started everything. "It's a song that never seems to go away," he said of Nights in White Satin. "It seemed to get into people's minds and just stay there." The band returned from hiatus in 1977 and continued recording. Their 1980s work, particularly the albums The Other Side of Life and Sur la Mer, introduced them to a younger generation who had no memory of the original FM revolution. The Moody Blues were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2018, a recognition that was long overdue and, to many fans, arrived far later than it should have been. But the real legacy was not the Hall of Fame, it was the headphones. It was the ritual, common to an entire generation of listeners, of putting on a Moody Blues record in a dark room and listening to the whole thing from beginning to end. Not as background music, as an experience. That kind of listening, attentive, total, completely given over to the sound, was what the band had always asked of their audience. And their audience, decade after decade, gave it back. All of it started with a bag of letters that could have been thrown away. All of it started with a phone call to a teenager who wrote a song about white satin and the ache of being young and feeling everything at once. The Moody Blues proved that survival sometimes came from the most unlikely places: a discarded mailbag, a chance phone call, a record label deceived in its own studio. The era they created became the soundtrack to a generation's most private moments. Late nights, long drives, the quiet hours between what was and what might be. What's your first memory of the Moody Blues? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from rock's golden era.